Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our evening meeting. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. We start with an invocation, which we observe by a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Corliss.
Here.
Halliburton. Morales.
Here.
Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Willett. 4 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. And we've got some minutes next.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the minutes for the work session and regular meetings of June 3rd, 2025.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, clerk?
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, we've got the reappointment of Ben Semple to the Design Review Commission for a 4-year term ending June 10th, 2029. Appreciate that Ben has served and is willing to serve again. I'm not sure, is he online? Okay, alrighty.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent for the reappointment of Ben Semple to the Design Review Commission for a 4-year term ending June 10th, 2029.
Without objection. Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate it. Next up, we've got the consent agenda, and there's just a couple things before I put it to council I wanted to point out. We've got the Spalding Ranch pathway that will work to kind of build on what the investments we've made in Spalding Ranch so far, and helps connect more neighborhoods and then through the park and onto other parts of the neighborhood. We've also got a whole bunch of affordable housing items on the consent agenda. And we've talked a lot about the importance and necessity of public-private partnerships to create opportunity in housing the Boise way. And so you'll see tonight that there's an agreement with Edlin and Company, with Northwest Real Estate Capital Corp to start construction on the Sherwood, which is housing for families exiting homelessness. There's also an agreement with Pacific Companies that is related to, they've done both Wilson Station that just opened and now Denton that's under construction. And then also an agreement with the Idaho Housing and Finance Association. They are investing money into the Sherwood, which was formerly known as the Park Apartments, that will be housing for families exiting homelessness. So really appreciate that the public-private partnerships that have gotten us to this point, and looking forward to welcoming residents into these homes once they're complete.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I may make 2 comments on there also on that Spalding Ranch phase, I really want to call out thanks to the purchasing team also here at the city. They had 12 competitive bids, and what was projected to be a $1.2 million cost actually came in at $815,000. So a good savings for the city. So they're doing really great work there. And also the pathway easement agreement. The more of these we have, the more connected we become as a city, and happy to see a lot of the good work here and appreciate that easement agreement.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have motion and second discussion. Clerk?
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we've got ordinances on first reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on first reading be read by number and title only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD-20-25. An ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 5, Chapter 2, General Offenses, creating the offense of control of speed and renumbering the subsequent provision accordingly and providing an effective date. ORD-21-25. An ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 5, Chapter 7, Noise Control, amending exceptions to provide an exception for First Amendment protected activities and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on second reading be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
ORD-19-25. An ordinance repealing Boise City Code Title 3, Chapter 6, entitled Child Care Facilities, amending Title 3, Chapter 1, Article A, entitled Business Licenses Generally, to strike references to child care worker and child care facility from sections 3 and 4, repealing Title 5, Chapter 12, Section 52, entitled Add Chapter 40, Child Care Facilities, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date.
And now we'll move into the new business public hearing section of the evening. ZOA 25-3, our zoning code, zoning ordinance amendments. So we've got Deanna Dupuy and Andrea Tuning here to present because the applicant is the city of Boise. I will then see, are people here to testify on this tonight? Wonderful. Great. Okay. And our any neighborhood associations here? Nobody online? Great. So since there aren't neighborhood associations, we'll move into both the two of you. We'll hear from the public, close the public hearing, and then we'll deliberate. Thanks for being here.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm here today and joined by Andrea Tuning to present ZOA 25-3, an amendment to the Boise City Code incorporating our first continuous improvement edits, as well as amending the table of allowed uses and use-specific standards to permit tiny homes on wheels. As the application before you is a zoning ordinance amendment, the council is the final decision-making authority with the approval criteria that the amendment is required for the public convenience or general welfare, and that it will not conflict with the comprehensive plan. As background for the city-initiated zoning code, as you all know, we adopted a new zoning code in 2023 with an effective date of December 1st, 2023. Staff received direction at that time to report back to council with any findings or edits on the code. In February of this year, I presented to council a year one review of our code's first year. One of the big takeaways that it was very early to determine trends. We had less than 600 full projects completed in the first year. However, what we did see was high volume in regards to customer service and early data indicating a strong interest in ADUs, likely as a result of us making the regulations smoother. As well as when you summed up the various different application types, we really saw impact as it related to developing infrastructure for all of our community within neighborhoods. So additions of new bike parking, significant miles of new sidewalk, pathways built, as well as trees planted. At that presentation, I also shared our proposed approach to amendments, which would be an iterative process in which we are testing, evaluating, engaging with data coming from the zoning code and our projects that are using it. And then it would fall into two different types of amendments, ones which we are calling continuous improvements, which are largely focused on improving consistency in code application, as well as interpretation. And then policy topic zoning ordinance amendments, which are larger discussions or larger topics that involve kind of more robust research, analysis, and community conversation. That brings us to here we are today with ZOA 25-3. This is our first continuous improvement, and you'll see within your document 140 plus edits related to various things, addressing terminology, ensuring we're consistent throughout the code, modifications or refinements of zone standards to clarify intent, various edits to our table of allowed uses and use-specific standards, things ranging from outdoor storage to improving regulations or clarity around kennels. We have some refinements to our permitted encroachments and accessory structure dimensional standards, then move into a lot of clarity edits as it related to our design and development standards, subdivisions, access connectivity, landscaping signs. And then finally, we refine some of our process procedures and make clear hearing procedures. And then you'll see some smaller edits and definitions or rules of measurement and then general code applicability to make sure we're touching the right things. Our team of dedicated planners really spent our first year getting the ground beneath our feet, but that does not mean that this continuous improvement was created in a vacuum. While many of these edits are staff identified, they're informed by thousands of interactions with our community. We're talking to community members many times an hour, and each of those are us working through the code to address problems, apply the zoning code from the smallest thing to where should my fence go, how do I site my garage, to large multifamily projects. And we're spent our first year really moving and digging in through those questions. So you'll see 17,000 calls in our first year, and all of that informed the edits you see today. We had 996 applications. Each of those helped inform edits. We had 61 public hearings, again, listening to testimony, listening to our commission and council members on how we can improve the code to ensure or clarify intent, as well as interdepartmental coordination. We had 69 interdepartmental review meetings where we're inviting the fire department, public works, solid waste to help provide, to make sure that the code is meeting their needs. In addition to those continuous improvements, you'll see the addition of tiny homes on wheels. This is really a piece of good timing for us. This has been a years-long project in which we wanted to expand housing options within our city, and we saw it as a perfect time to roll this into the zoning ordinance amendment. So you'll see that we have allowed in all zones where ADUs are allowed as an accessory use to a residential structure. We're proposing one per site. Each of them will be less than 400 square feet. They'll need permanent utility connections and will be subject to the base zone dimensional standards and need to be built with no plus building materials or an equivalent standard. And as I mentioned, this has really been building on years-long works through the mayor's office and the Office of Innovation and Performance. It started in 2021 through a human-centered design process in which we really work with our communities to help identify and come up with solutions to our housing affordability needs. And the tiny homes on wheels came out as a really promising idea that our community could help provide more affordable housing options. So the mayor's office partnered with Leap Housing to do a pilot, and that pilot, we had 6 sites that were selected, and with review from the Idaho Policy Institute, we've made the recommendations in the code today. We presented this application to Planning and Zoning on May 5th, and we received a recommendation of approval. In addition, with a recommendation to expand the zones that tiny homes on wheels are allowed to mixed-use zones. In addition, at that public hearing, we received one public comment for a request for broader public engagement on the zoning ordinance amendments. We've also received written public comment. You'll see in your packet, we have comments from the airport, our code compliance and community resources team that want to update or be responsive to recent legislative changes related to childcare, as well as some public works comments related to hillside procedures. In addition, we've received about 15 other comments from our community. Largely, some of them are based off of just the values of the zoning code and comments on kind of what we're trying to accomplish with it. Other things included concerns about the standards in R1C and R2 zones, requirements for sidewalks, parking, neighbor notification, and annexation. Some comments about our affordability incentives in the minor land division. And then again, repeating that call for more robust community engagement. And then we've had some mixed feedback on the tiny homes on wheels.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Andrea, on this slide, could you give me an idea of timeline of soliciting feedback on changes to the zoning code from agencies, specifically within the city of Boise, so departments and from a council view, it's one city, but I recognize that something as complicated as this would require probably some lead time and different considerations for different departments. So when is feedback solicited? When is it expected? And how might we go about that in future continuous edits?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, I think that's a great question. In this instance, we were coordinating before submittal with some of our departments, especially those that are part of that interdepartmental review. And then additionally, afterwards, we transmit to our agency partners at submittal. And so that was in March. And they do comment at different paces. I think that a standard process moving forward into the future is a great idea, especially as we know that this will be an annual process and we can set timelines and work backwards from there.
All right, thank you, Deanna. Appreciate that.
So we appreciate the comments that we received at Planning and Zoning, as well as the written comment we received from agency and the public. In response to that, you'll see in your packet that we did create some additional edits that we wanted to add to the zoning ordinance amendment. That would be in direct response to the Planning and Zoning Commission discussion, which was to add tiny homes on wheels as an allowed use in the MX1, 2, 3, and U zones. This would actually more accurately mirror the accessory dwelling units. So we felt that was a positive step and a good recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. As I said, we updated in response to the code compliance comments, and this was really post legislative session, so that timeline was shorter to update childcare provisions to align with those changes, as well as the response to the airport about the airport influence overlay. And then in addition to our public comments from the community, we recognize we want to be more transparent about the zoning code program. So we're working with the Office of Community Engagement to develop a website that will be launching soon, where we'll very clearly provide resources, pathways for engagement and evaluation, as well as more clarity around the continuous improvement kind of process and program so folks can follow along and get engaged. And in addition, we are moving forward with a planned fall engagement on the zoning code to help prep for that 2026 continuous improvement cycle. So the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the ordinance with the additional edits identified in that May 5th project report. And the motion before the council is a decision on the zoning ordinance amendment and any additional edits identified in our project reports. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions, as well as Andrea.
Thank you, Deanna.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah, start with the council president, then Councilmember Corliss, then Stead, then Morales. Great.
Madam Mayor, Deanna, what changes are in front of us now that are different than what council was presented a little while ago, a few months ago? It seems like some changes based on agency feedback, maybe some changes in legislation, but could you just speak to what's different? Because I felt like we really dug in on those and got you as many comments as we possibly could. And we really appreciate the responses that you gave us. But I want to understand what we may not have seen that we should maybe give a more critical eye to today.
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, that's a great question. And as part of the application process and the public hearing process, we are collecting feedback and folks are invited to provide comments. So you're right, there has been agency comment and that is reflected in the red line document that was in the newest report. I'll most specifically call out the airport influence area. There was a restructuring in that in response to some feedback. You'll notice there's just high level, the purpose statement is revised. We've organized it by airport influence area A, B, C, A, B, B1, C. Before it was kind of a mismatch of just in different order. So there's a restructuring and then kind of some key points around. Previously, we had a base zone density of 5 units per acre in the B1 that has been, and then an option for a conditional use permit to increase that. Instead, there is now a base zone allowance of 15 units per acre in the B1 if you're within a quarter mile of a MX zone. So that's the biggest change you'll see. In addition, in the several sections around childcare, there's some small terminology changes to reflect the Idaho state law, generally saying that we need to now, instead of complying with the licenses through the clerk, they would be through the licensing through the state, because that would be the new law. And the ordinance is just passed to do that earlier today. And then we added some findings in response to a public works comment on Hillside. Those were actually in the old code that just didn't get carried over, and they gave us that comment. And then the tiny homes on wheels. I would say those are the most substantial ones that have changed.
Madam Mayor, Deanna, do you have any, it seems like we may have had a conversation with Nikki about this when the findings of the pilot and recommendations were presented, but how do we arrive at one tiny home on wheels per lot? I think about this in the context of when we're kind of moving towards a more form-based code, if it's complying with a lot of the setbacks and height restrictions and other things, I want to better understand why we would only consider one per lot.
Madam Mayor, President Nash, I'll answer this and I think I can cover it all. We treated it very similar to how we treat an accessory dwelling unit. So that was our direction. And that's the same rule for an accessory dwelling unit, is that you could have one per lot.
Okay, my question was answered.
Hi, Deanna. Thank you so much for this review. I do have a few questions and some clarifications to go through. Actually, I kind of have a laundry list. So I'll start with on section 110504.7a. We crossed out language that said give notice within 3 business days, and it now reads reasonable time frame. I'm wondering if maybe we could put some parameters on it, or at like a not to exceed 28 or 30 days, just so people have an expectation on when they'll get some information back.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, we did talk about that one. And I believe that is when us posting this off my memory and I can pull it up. That is for the revised findings. And as that's something that you all in practice have been getting after a decision made by a commission or by the council, we need to come back and have council adopt the revised findings. That is hard to put a timeline on because it's up to when it can get onto a council agenda. So we wanted to leave us open to be able to say revised findings and make sure we are at a reasonable time frame so that we can make sure that we're following the letter of our code as best as we can. But that is definitely something we're trying to turn around as quick as possible.
Yeah, I think even if we put a guardrail on it, even if it's 180 days, that there's at least an expectation that we'll have an answer back and that it won't linger out there for a period of time. Something for just a consideration there. In section 1105, 11-0505.2 G3, it says the proposed development will not, and this is the quote part, will not adversely affect other property in the vicinity. This language is a little bit ambiguous, and we had some similar language on page, I think it's 368 of the code, 1105-04.7. Says it says it will not create a material negative impact on surrounding properties. And I just wondered if we could maybe just align those there. Because one of them saying it's not going to adversely affect the property in the vicinity. The other language says it will not create a material negative impact on the surrounding properties. And I'm happy to send this over. This is kind of probably hard to go through this in a meeting. So I don't know how best to provide this.
I mean, what you need to do is propose a change and see if council would be supportive because the ordinance is up tonight for action.
Madam Mayor, could I just ask for clarification? Could you repeat the question you asked or statement?
So my recommendation is to change the language on 11-05-05.2 G.3 that states will not adversely affect other property in the vicinity, and remove that language and replace it with the language in 11-05-04.7 that says will not create a material negative impact on surrounding properties.
So you're asking for consistent language.
That's correct.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, if I could clarify, so that specific section is regard to the hillside ordinance, and those findings actually were at the request from Public Works as we're reviewing hillside applications. So making sure that there is no impact when you're changing grading and hillside to the other property. And that was actually carried over from the previous code. Just to give some background on that specific.
So the language that exists, the amendment proposed by staff is a request from Public Works that deals specifically with hillside ordinance issues. And they're requesting that we use the language that used to be in the code prior to the zoning code changes.
Correct, Madam Mayor.
I would ask that we stick with the language related from our hillside staff because I believe there's likely a reason that they made that specific request.
The request for the negative impact on surrounding properties. because that's the language I'm proposing we keep. And we use that same language in the other section for consistency.
And the other section is
11.05.05.2 G3.
and that's about Hillside. Both are about the Hillside ordinance.
I don't know. I took these notes. I don't have it in front of me. Yeah. It says the proposed development will not adversely affect the other property in the vicinity. If the language cannot be, I'm just trying to align the language to make it as simple as possible as we read that. If not, I think having language that says will not adversely affect other property in the vicinity is really vague, and that we need to follow that up with either some examples or something that we want to see. Otherwise, I don't think that gives much guidance to what we're looking for. The preference would be to try to align the language to be the same.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
if I could think out loud and then maybe just offer some advice. Generally, when we're drafting legislation, and this is similar because we're making law here, we try for internal consistency. I don't know enough today to tell you which one of these is narrower or broader, and where one might be. It might be important to have a distinction between the two. I bet there are answers to those questions. I don't know if we're going to get them today. I would be comfortable in my motion directing staff to look for opportunities to find more consistent language in areas like this, which I feel like is consistent with some of the other continuous improvements that you've done. So would that be sufficient for Councilmember Corliss if we directed staff to?
I think if we're looking in specific areas,
Okay, all right.
where possible, or to provide examples, so we're ensuring that we're getting clarity as we're making these changes.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I appreciate that. I like that because just looking cursory search of our zoning code, one has 11 notations in the code and the other has 21. So there's a significant number of them throughout the code. And so understanding definitions, if these two are different standards, and then why they are that way in those different instances would be helpful.
All right, so no changes tonight, which I think is wise, with the direction that staff look for opportunities for consistency. Yep.
Okay. So moving on, under ADUs, we have that balconies shall not be located in areas that will cause minimal interference with the privacy of neighboring properties, which is another area that looks like it may be to provide an example. So again, that's with the balconies on the ADUs.
Madam Mayor, if I jump in here, we pushed staff pretty hard on this one. Councilmember Stead and I. What we didn't want to do is we're trying. I think one of the reasons ADUs have been successful is we really loosen restrictions on them, which allows it to build them in places you otherwise couldn't. What staff was seeing, and I'd be curious if Deanna has specific examples of this, but I know they gave it to us, is you build a 600 square foot accessory dwelling unit, but there's no restrictions in the code about what the deck could be. So you might have a 600 square foot unit with a 400 square foot deck attached to it, and felt like it was maybe deviating outside of the impacts that we wanted to see for these types of ADUs on neighboring properties. So wanted to make sure that square footage requirement applied not only to the entire footprint of the accessory dwelling unit, not just to that. And I may not have gone as far as staff here on this one, but I think it makes sense based on what they described to me as what they were seeing. But I'd be interested in if they have any specific examples.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily on the square footage again, and being mindful that this is the first time I've been able to provide comment onto the changes. So I apologize. I know it's lengthy, but I think it's important. Is again, this is another one where we're saying the balcony located in the areas will cause minimal interference. This is probably an opportunity we can just note down, because I had the same change. Can we look at having the same language, material negative impact, just so we're keeping consistency on what we're trying to look for and what we're trying to guide our developers when they're putting in applications and how they're building these projects. I think some consistency there would be really good. The next one I have is on fourplexes, and if I'm reading the code correctly, it looks like all fourplexes are single level with front doors on each side. I'm wondering if our code, this one I don't know, does our code allow for those square fourplexes that have doors on different sides?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, how the code is written, it is, if you are going to have access, you need to have a front door, at least one front door facing the street. And then we want complementary yards or doors facing internal. So that you don't have someone's front door at someone's side yard.
Okay, thank you for
Madam-
the clarification.
Madam Mayor, Deanna, could you refresh my memory? We had gone back and forth on, council provided feedback on what was proposed. I think you provided responses, and then there was 2 areas where we said we wanted to table. And my memory was, one was related to some commercial uses in residential neighborhoods that Councilmember Stead brought up, and the other was related to where doors can face with multifamily, and that feels like the one we just discussed. So it was my impression that that was not included in these edits. Could you clarify for me?
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash. Yes, it was the home occupations for salons, and that was not included. And it was a specific piece about duplexes. And I was tracking a different one. And if you could give me a second, I can pull
Okay,
it up.
yeah.
Can I pull that one up in a little bit? I need to open up a couple.
We allow
more.
phone calls, so we can.
Okay, the next one is on livestock, and it's more just for a clarification in the code, because it says an animal unit is 1 horse, mule, cow, llama. It kind of reads like a person could have all 4, but I don't think that's the intention.
I'll
So
jump
just
in here.
something to
That is
review.
a state definition for an animal unit. 1 AU equals those things.
Okay, that's yeah, and I think that's fine. I think in our code, it just doesn't say, are we allowing for 1 animal unit of each type or just a animal unit?
If 1 animal unit is allowed, then you choose one of those animals for your 1 AU.
I think it just needs a little clarification in the code. Apologize, just taking a look here. So on the parking reduction and housing incentives, I think it's page 277 in the code E. It reads as if we are saying that the developer no longer has has it to be affordable or sustainable to get parking reduction.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, this is about getting a conditional use permit to go above 50%. Is that true? I don't have this code, but I think I remember the edit. Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, just saw it. That's a clarification. We, as in part of the terminology, we changed it to just housing incentives and instead of having that longer description, but it's the same thing, just changing the terminology.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Deanna. Great. The other question that I've been getting from a lot of constituents too is on minor land splits for both residential and commercial. I don't believe anything's changing in our code today on that, but I'd like to ask if we can maybe consider that for our next revision to take a look at.
Madam Mayor, if I could, I have a list of a few dozen things, and that is one of those that I've been hearing as well. So that is something that I plan to put to staff from council for future revisions.
Awesome. And then for ADUs, I think as Paula mentioned too, as a discussion, maybe taking a look at next time, if a lot's over a certain size, maybe if we could add an additional 2 ADUs or 2 tiny homes on wheels. I guess taking a look at that at the next revision as well. I do have comments on the airport influence zone, if that's going to go through tonight. So we talk about the noise reduction, the new airport influence on page 85, section C, has the new addition for new residential development outside of the 60 decimal noise level, noise contour. But we don't have any noise contour maps in our zoning code. We have one map in our zoning code. So I think if we're wanting to include that in there, that we need to include that map in the zoning code. I'd also say that changing this to a quarter mile of a property zoned MX3 or MX4 seems really arbitrary. I think that there just needs to be some additional discussion on why we pegged to that standard. And also provide some public input. We see that the airport influence overlay reads on page 94 is to ensure future development within the airport influence area is designed in accordance with the airport master plan. And as my understanding is, we're working on the airport master plan today. So this feels a little bit like a cart before the horse. And I would highly recommend that we pull this off the table and take a look at it. So we have time to provide more input on it and see the timing for that airport master plan. The change in density that we're asking for here is more than 200%. It's not insignificant, it's very significant. And I don't think we've had the opportunity to really ask questions that we may have, find out why we're changing it to a quarter mile. I don't think we have the right maps in our zoning code. And I think we also need some public comment in on this one as well. That's all I have.
Madam Mayor, I appreciate the questions and due diligence by Councilmember Corliss. Thanks for setting the stage for those questions. My first question was about that was how I know that the airport, we've heard that the airport has a master plan coming. I think there's a couple of other kind of strategic initiatives that they're working on. And I wondered how what we're reviewing tonight is supported, or I don't want to say overlays with the other strategic initiatives and how they come together.
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Stead. Yes, so we do have a current master plan, airport master plan. This is just an update that's moving forward. So we would still be, we would be referring to the existing master plan. So that is in the current code. And we've coordinated with the airport on this, and this was in response to some of the previous applications that came through this past year and direction both from planning and zoning and from city council to figure out how to approach development specifically in the B1. And so that's how, through the continuous improvement, we learned through an application, proposed a solution, and that's how it is here today. The quarter mile within it from an MX3, that's actually mirrored several places in the code, but I understand it's in a different context as it relates to the airport. A lot of our incentives are based off of a quarter mile from an MX zone, really shows like where density near those key infrastructures areas are. But again, that's our kind of working off how to improve the current code as we get ready for future planning for the airport.
Thank you. I love the work, and I love that the tiny home on wheels is before us. Thank you so much for bringing that forward. Also, of course, love the effort in continuous improvement. We say there's nothing we can't do better. So I love that we're taking that into practice and really giving it a review. I also know that we're maybe not seeing, I guess one of the things that I was hoping to see come out of the zoning code changes was a real mix in diversity of housing options. I think what we've seen up here, just anecdotally, is the large apartment complexes, which I think are we need that, yes. And I would love us to see, and we've had these conversations, but I think it's important that I put it out there for the world too. What I think we haven't seen that I was expecting to see were the kind of lower impact duplexes, quads, tries. And I think that that's more something that could ultimately be more accessible to our current property owners rather than a large scale developer or an out of state investment. And I think we're like tonight, I think for the most part, we had kind of committed to doing the first pass as these are the administrative changes where something was maybe left out, like we've seen in the Hillside example, or where the language just needed to be cleaned up, something like that. I understand also I think it's important to remember that we're in the infancy still of this new policy. And so and the market conditions have changed dramatically from when this was all first discussed a few years ago. But I would love to continue to make effort to encourage those smaller types of developments and I would encourage staff to have conversations with some of those smaller local developers that are maybe just going to do 1 or 2 projects in their career of development, so that we're really getting that perspective on what their hangups are, and that we're not continuing to add regulation to those types of developments where we maybe don't have those on single family homes. Because I would love to think that ultimately there's current residents of Boise who have property that they could turn into a duplex or a tri or something like that. And maybe that's the only development project they're ever going to do. But, if they have a laundry list of improvements that have to be made to the property that would maybe be waived if they were doing a single family home, I would love us to better align those so that it's as accessible to build a duplex as it is to build a single family home. That's the part that we haven't seen yet with the new code that I look forward to continuing to put effort and focus on so that we can ultimately see that balance. Because right now we're still getting the single family homes and we're still getting the big apartment complexes. But those smaller ones, I think when they exist in neighborhoods, you just don't even know they're there. They just blend right in. So I would like to see more of that. And I think that's all I had, Deanna. Thank you so much for all your work on this. I know it must be difficult you put so much work into, the whole staff put so much work into this, putting it out into the world. And then immediately there's a new council that's looking for changes. So I appreciate your work with us on this. And I think I can appreciate, and I hope the rest of council does, that this is a very long-term project. This is going to be a living document for the years to come. And we're not going to, make tremendous changes right now. But we will continue to look for strategies to deliver what we're ultimately looking for in the community.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Deanna. Just first of all, thank you to you and all the staff. I mean, it's very extensive to look through every line of the code to try to find these continuous improvements, and it's a long list of them. And I'm just looking at the list that you've found, right? You've looked at every single line. So really appreciate your team's work. Also, our Planning and Zoning Commission, as this was presented before them, I thought they brought forward some really great thoughts, maybe some things to be worked on down the road, but really appreciate their service picking through this. I guess just to piggyback off of Council Pro Tem Stead, I also have really thought about the smaller developer opportunities, especially in this new market that we have, and getting more local residents involved in that. And I think we've mentioned it a few times, but something on that, hopefully on Council President Nash's list, is single stair development, a lighter density, something that can be done on current lot sizes. Is something I just think we're seeing in neighboring states like Montana, as well as cities that we may look up to. I would like my main question also regarded airport, and you kind of touched on how I think this maybe is being seen as continuous improvement. However, my comment would be that I think this is much more of a change topic in terms of looking at and you mentioned projects that have come before us and some of the council directed. One of those projects that was approved this last year I believe was 29 units an acre. And so that was done through the conditional use permit process, which is allowed in the current zone. This change would not allow that process and would limit it to probably 15 units per acre, or maybe a smaller amount, depending on the zoning. And so I think that is kind of a substantial change, maybe not a continuous improvement. I'd also like to learn a little bit more. So I do believe that these are probably not continuous improvements and should not be considered tonight. In addition to that, also looking at childcare facilities within the B zoning. I can think of 2 that have been within that B zoning further to the southeast. So just kind of thinking through those things. Also the noise contour, that was a big topic of discussion during that project, and not really seeing that in the current code and how we're going to use that and apply that, I just think is part of a bigger discussion that we've been expecting to have at some point. And so I think these things probably are better suited for a conversation later. And they also didn't get comment from planning and zoning, so it wasn't there before them. So just some thoughts on that one.
I would just follow up on. I don't think so. Deanna, did we get anywhere on the? Yeah. Working on it still. Okay. All right.
How about, since it's a public hearing, while they're looking that up, we could hear from the members of the public that are here to give you a little bit more time, Deanna. So come on up. And are you Jason Bosley? Great. I've got you on. I don't have you on the list. So when no, that's okay. It's not a big deal. But just when after you give your remarks, will you just write your name down? Thank you. Hi.
Madam Mayor, Council. My name is Jason Bosley. I'm an owner builder of a tiny home located on 28th, and part of the LEAP pilot program. Moved into that tiny home November of last year, and it's been fantastic for me. But I just really wanted to speak in favor of allowing tiny homes on wheels, mostly from a flexibility standpoint. It gives an avenue for someone like me to have ownership, but also gives a lot of flexibility to the property owners themselves. It allows them, it's a lot lower cost of entry as opposed to an ADU or something like that, but it allows them to plan on a shorter timeline. They can get up to speed more quickly, but then also if their life changes, the tiny home still is on wheels, and it's minimally intrusive. You're going to have your utility hookups, but if they want to do something else down the road, or they sell the property and you have a change of interest, it just gives a lot of flexibility. And I think the affordability option and the flexibility of tiny homes is fantastic. And so seeing this move forward is really exciting.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, you're up.
Yeah. My name is Macy Miller. I don't do well on the spot, so I wrote a thing down and I'm going to read it, and I apologize if it comes off too sterile. My name is Macy Miller. I live at 1083 Ede Road in Moscow, Idaho. We drove down yesterday to witness this because this is that big of a deal to me. I'm also speaking on behalf of Tiny Houses on Wheels. So we drove down yesterday from our tiny house, which we've lived in for the last 13 years. I built it in Boise, Idaho, and I have been an advocate since before these kids were born. We came down to witness this because what Boise is doing is phenomenal. City staff has done an amazing job. So I've helped cities throughout the nation wrestle the challenges presented by tiny homes on wheels. None of them have accomplished what you guys are accomplishing. And I don't want to put too much pressure on that, because what you're setting is a precedent that I think will be replicated throughout the nation. In a lot of ways, you are solving all of the hiccups that are out there currently. So this ordinance strikes a careful balance of being achievable for tiny home dwellers while also providing meaningful benefits to existing landowners. What's especially unique is the approach is how the ordinance integrates tiny homes into the broader urban fabric rather than just isolating them to a tiny house community. That model has not been as successful. many well-intentioned efforts have fallen short by overlooking those challenges. And the way that this is written, I'm sure that tiny homes will become a lasting positive addition to the community. My one request for you guys is that you keep an eye to the future going forward, because a group of folks, including myself, are currently working on the next iteration of tiny house codes for the 2027 IRC. The aim of that effort is to give a path forward for building officials to have the tools they need to take these under your own compliance. Right now, you're kind of relegated to third parties and trusting outside sources to inspect them. We want the building department to have the wherewithal to inspect tiny houses. It's a process to get codes changed. I've been at it for 13, 14 years now, and it feels lightning speed for what's been accomplished. And we need the building codes to be there, but the next step is the zoning codes. And you guys are making something that is exactly what's needed for tiny houses. And I'm so excited to see it, seriously. I just want to urge you to adopt this ordinance and thank city staff very much. I was also involved in this from 2021. I've been speaking with several staff members over the years about this, giving my insights as I could. But I'm just so impressed with your leadership and your courage to challenge conventional thinking and create new housing paths. It's really very, very exciting for some of us housing nerds out there. So, you want me to write my name on this?
Yeah, and thanks for coming down. So you live in Moscow now?
I do. So I lived in Boise for a while, and something like this was not available to me. But the city of Boise helped me get legal placement where I'm at right now. So even from afar, Boise has been my little champion, and I'm a Boise native. And so it was a sad thing to leave, but it's kind of magical being back. And for this reason, like it's really cool. I'm all proud of you guys.
Well, thanks for making the trip. And also thanks for setting the context around what's being proposed. I really appreciate
It's really
that.
nice. It's beautiful. So I love it. Hope you make it through.
I've got stickers for
And thanks for the civic lesson.
yeah, I've
Oh,
got
it's a
stickers for
lot.
the kids. You guys can pick one if you want.
Oh, there is a printer. Go up there, kiddos. You got this.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to
Yeah.
just add, thank you so much. It's really special, I think, to have you here. And it sounds like you've also been working hard on this. So thank you so much for all the work that you've put in. My brother lived with his family of 4 in a 350 square foot tiny house.
Doable. I know
It is
sounds
doable.
crazy, but
Yeah,
we
he did
love
that
it.
for years.
We
The-
also had a Great Dane.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's definitely doable. It was a lot of fun for them while they were doing it until the pandemic, and then they moved far away.
That,
but
that was a make or break thing for a lot of people. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, come on up. And will you do the same after you're done? Thanks.
Yes, I just came from work. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Armin Teray. I am the owner and the occupant of one of the tiny houses on 1500 South Grand Avenue. I just
cool.
want to put a face behind the project and kind of what LEAP has meant. I am actually a resident physician with Full Circle Health. So I have the privilege of taking care of some of our really vulnerable populations in Boise and coming and doing my training here. And a huge component of choosing to come here, I searched far and wide across the country, was coming to a city that was going to make living in the tiny house that I built with my own hands in Tennessee and that I got to involve my community with. There, I met so many neighbors, and the farmers down the road came and used their tractor to get the beam up for my roof. And it's been a community project from the get-go, and to be able to come to a place where it could continue to be an integral part of the community was a huge reason why I chose to come and train here. And I'm very much thinking about staying and continuing to provide medical care in the Treasure Valley and in Idaho in general. And I just want to say thank you for making it possible. And I know it's easy to just say no, but thank you for doing the work to make it possible. Also, this is Marissa. She's my landlord. She waters my garden and takes care of my cat, and vice versa. Hi, I'm Marissa. I just want to say that my grandmother lived in my backyard for, obviously not legally, and she was a snowbird, so she would live in her RV for like 3 months of the year. But she passed away, and I bought the house, and I'm really young. I'm 29, so I was probably almost 28 when I bought the house. And when she passed away, I had no idea what I was going to do. I know there's no one back there anymore. And all the neighbors were like, where's your where's your grandma? And I'm like, I'm so sorry, she's not here. And then Leap paired me with Minta. And I thought it was the perfect pairing because I think my grandma would really love if this was a possibility for everybody. So
It's a great way to meet the neighbors too.
Yeah.
They want to know what's in the back.
they all love it. They're all over.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I just want to say really quick, I appreciate you both coming out. You're, gosh, you're making me cry. But it's just so sweet about the community build for the house that you have there, and being willing to give Boise a chance too to stay here and providing services in our healthcare that we really, really need in this city. And I hope you do consider staying here because I think it's a magical place. I really do. And thank you as a homeowner to be willing to take a chance. You're taking a chance on this, and I think the more people who see this and see the successful program of it can see the opportunities, because I think it's definitely has benefits for both sides. So thank you so much for coming out here tonight and speaking. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Deanna.
Madam Mayor, I did find the section. So we kind of split the difference on this. We could delete some sections. We had the doors, but we revised that and included the illustration. So if we want to split the difference, we could remove, it's figure 3.3. I think that image is new from what we thought. So to keep the intent of allowing absolute flexibility on where the doors would face, I would recommend striking figure 3.3. However, when we worked with staff, we felt we wanted to be more clear to say that to provide an illustration. But again, to your guys' points, I think we could remove figure 3.3 and that the following figures.
Madam Mayor,
Would
Deanna,
address-
could you give me a page number?
Oh, I'm sorry. 156 of the actually PDF. 195 of the other way around. So it'd be H and then the figure, because the figure is explaining H.
So these couldn't be facing the property this way, this way, this way. So imagine a street. I'm just gonna have this on. So just for clarity, so there is, and just for the edification of council, there's a figure that shows how internally facing doors can be compliant with the code and the proposed change. We liked the picture. However, what I'm concerned about is when I drive down U-Stick on my way here, I see all these new developments going in along there that are attached, multifamily, and there's 4 units. It's just like a strip, and this is the best way they've been able to do it on a small lot. There's just one alley, and then they have a road there, a private road, and they have 4 units facing the property to the east or west of them. And it seems like that's what we're prohibiting here. And I think what I previously stated is that I'm worried that that restriction is going to limit those types of developments that I'm seeing. I personally am not hearing problems with that. Maybe staff has seen something different. Regardless of what those may be, I would be happy to hear staff's perspective on it. But regardless, that may be still development that council is interested in. But I would be happy to hear more on that.
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash. Yeah, we've heard concerns, and I definitely want to be responsive. And I think specifically the instance you, Kate, explained, there's a road so that you're not, when the image that we're describing is typically, if that's the only access to the unit, and so somebody is walking from, their parking through someone's side yard, and that's the only access. So, thinking for households walking by the side yard daily, if there's motion sensors, we just thought about the impact to the neighboring property, and that can, especially with increased density, add that impact to that neighboring property. But again, it is just a balance between, there is another way to design your project where you can orient it to have less of an impact or even be further distance from that rear property line. So if there was a road or an access point, and so, but if it's just, within 3 feet, 5 to 3, you could be 5 feet from that property line and that be your front door. And that's your only entrance. So we wanted to say there's a better way to design this.
Madam Mayor, Deanna, are you saying that if you're a back door, a front door plus a road, even if it's private, that would be enough of a buffer that this wouldn't apply?
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, we could specify that. I think it's really because of the side setbacks, only 5 feet. We were concerned about that 5-foot sidewalk being right on the property line with the front door to the side. I think we could specify actually it's appropriate, but with a greater distance.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, just for comment here. I would say I sent a series of questions to staff about how I would like to evaluate additions to the zoning code going forward. And I won't go into all of them there, but it was really like just trying to get at what is absolutely necessary to meet our land use planning goals, while also promoting values of how can we make homeownership and just even housing affordability like a key priority. And I think there are a lot of good things we're doing today. What I'm more worried about is not necessarily that one bad thing we're doing, but a death by 1,000 cuts where it just gets the gap between single family and small multifamily is just so large that it just forces a lot of developers to choose that. An example, I live in a multifamily development. I own my home there, but there's an acre development just next to me, and on 1 acre, they're building 3 homes. And I think about, as a policymaker, what can I continuously do to try to make sure that we're not incentivizing that over more homes. So I think on this one, I would like to do more work. If it's a setback issue we're considering, I'd like to consider a different setback or something else, or nothing at all. So on that specific one, I plan to table that consistent with our ask a couple months ago. But we understand it, and we understand that you're getting different calls than we are on these types of things. But we want to keep that dialogue open about that.
All right, anything further for Deanna? I just want to make sure everybody has gotten a chance to talk. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing.
And if you just give me a minute, I want to make sure my motion is specific enough. No. No, the one on, you showed me the citation for the multifamily facing the. Madam Mayor, question for Deanna. Deanna, if if we want to strike that, how would you like me to refer to that specific provision?
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, I was just trying to pull that up. It is going to be the duplex section. Duplex, triplex, fourplexes. So 11.03.03.2 G 7 H and figure 3.3.
We like the figure as a helpful tool. The feedback we got was and Deanna, one more question on this one. The airport overlay, I think there's obvious interest from council on tabling that. Is there anything else related to the airport that we need to, other than what was mentioned in the staff report, that was new, that wasn't something we had seen before? Or is everything mentioned in the staff report? Because I'd just like to refer to how it's referred to in the staff report, but I'm worried that's not going to capture other additions we may not be aware of.
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, I think it might be easier just to say no red lines in that section. So reject all red lines.
What section would you like me to refer to?
Airport influence area overlay. I have someone repeating it to me.
Is that
And it is
11
11.
dash 2 dash 7? 3. And then it depends how, so actually, Madam Mayor, I have a question on this one. I believe there was one edit above these kind of more substantial ones that maybe still makes sense. Here, I gotta get to it again, sorry.
Council,
The
Madam Mayor.
sensitive lands,
Oh,
the sensitive
yeah.
lands change.
I got 11273D, which was
Yeah.
consistent with the staff report. That's how I was planning. on
So,
referring.
so C would still go through, which is establishment of sensitive lands overlay district instead of establishment of character overlay district, correct?
Yeah, basic
Yeah.
D down, I think
So,
would be.
so just D.
Okay. Alrighty. Madam Mayor, I move approval of ZOA 25-3 with the inclusion of the recommended additional edits that were outlined in the staff report, along with the following exceptions. Exclude 1127.3D regarding the airport influence area overlay requirements. I'd also excluding 11332 G7H and figure 3.3 regarding small multifamily and requirements around that. And I'd like to make the following, direct staff to make the following changes that we'd allow 2 tiny homes on wheels per lot. Also direct staff on the next round of continuous edits to evaluate up to 2 accessory dwelling units per lot with included definitions for junior accessory dwelling units. And direct staff to evaluate consistent uses of language regarding negative impacts to surrounding properties as appropriate. And yeah.
Second.
Madam Mayor, just thank you to the staff for the amazing work that you've done on this. The 120 proposed edits, probably more now, that we're this aligned on where you've gotten and where we'd like to land. It's just so impressive, and that you have people driving across the state to show their appreciation. I think it's indicative of the work that you've done. So thank you so much for this. I'll just reiterate my guiding principles are how can we make housing affordable, and how can we do what we can. I'll just share this. My living situation growing up when I was a teenager, my grandfather, he was a truck driver, and he had a very serious heart attack, and he became disabled and was no longer able to support his family driving a truck any longer. And they didn't really have any options. And he lived in a camper out behind our house for the next 20 years. And that probably wasn't legal. That isn't a living situation that I think most people would want for themselves, or that a lot of family members would be comfortable with. But it's what like he did to get by, and he had a very happy life there, and he has a very happy life today in a home. But I think it speaks to not everybody we can't expect everybody to be able to have the white picket fence and the large single family home. We have to recognize that people have different circumstances in their lives, some not of their own choosing. And I think what we've done with the Tiny Home on Wheels program, although that's not what happened in my personal situation, that's not what we're legalizing today. It does get at not everybody's in the same situation, and they want more flexibility in their life, and they want the freedom that would come from maybe not having a $3,000 or $4,000 a month mortgage. And so I just thank you to staff for all the work that you've done on this, and thank you to council for your critical eye and sharing these values of trying to promote housing affordability in the policymaking that we engage with on city council. And thank you to the mayor for your leadership and being very responsive to us on wanting to do these continuous improvements and coming up with a consistent cadence on that. It's not easy to touch your zoning code all the time. That's something that you kind of just want to let lie, and really appreciate your leadership on this.
Madam Mayor. I'll just mention, I think the way I've kind of visualized these zoning code changes is, obviously very heavily invested as a regular citizen and neighbor during the modern zoning code adoption, and kind of felt like we had a zoning code, and being that we're the city of trees, tree themed here, that former zoning code was, it was time, it had led its useful life, and we kind of replaced it with the modern zoning code, something new. And as that modern zoning code starts to root in, it may be too early to do significant grafting or pruning of this code right now, but that we're watching it and thinking about any little things that we can do to amend it, that maybe the prior council wasn't able to consider as the data collects. And so just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing to help us understand how this is growing, and so that we can take action as soon as we can to maybe help it more. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, Deanna, Andrea, I appreciate all your hard work on these edits. I should notice and say that I've sat in several meetings with these ladies over the past 4 or 5 years talking about zoning code changes. So this isn't something that's just been happening. As we all know, I think we did something just absolutely amazing getting that zoning code passed. And as council member Morales had stated, I think of it like a tree. Like, we planted that tree, that big tree got planted, and now we're kind of deciding what roots, what limbs do we want to trim. These are kind of minor things that we brought up, and I think we've done a lot of good work. I'm so excited. I was so happy to see everybody come out with the tiny home on wheels, because I think this is a whole new housing inventory stock we haven't been able to have before, and it's going to impact so many different types of people. I think Jason put it right. It's really affordable for the homeowner and for the person who's living in the tiny home, to be able to stand up a housing unit. And there's lots of different reasons people may want to do this. And I think about all the construction workers that are going to happen, going to come in from Micron and Meta and others, when they might not be looking for a permanent solution, but maybe they want some of their own space. I think these are great solutions, and it's going to have a big impact on our housing stock within the city. And I'm so excited for this. And I just applaud the PDS staff for the work that you're doing, all the comments you've captured, not only from council, but from external. We're doing some really good work, and thank you very much.
All right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Well, thanks, everybody. I want to thank staff. Thanks, everybody, for turning out today. Really appreciate all that's gone into this, the feedback from council to improve this. More to come. The motion passes, so now I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor, move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.